Sarah Jane Reynolds trudged down the dirt path, a canvas bag full of library books slung over her thin shoulder. The warm June sun filtered through the leafy canopy overhead, dappling the trail with patches of light and shadow. Birds chittered in the branches above, and a gentle breeze ruffled Sarah's long chestnut hair. The 11-year-old quickened her pace, eager to reach her destination. It had been a whole week since her last visit, and she couldn't wait to share the new stories she had discovered. As the trail wound through the woods behind the small town of Millersville, Sarah's thoughts drifted to her encounter with the new librarian, Mrs. Hanson. The woman had seemed nice at first, always greeting Sarah with a warm smile and a kind word. But then she had started asking questions about Sarah's sister Lily and why she never came to the library herself. Sarah's defenses had instantly gone up. It was none of Mrs. Hanson's business. No one could understand, and she didn't want anyone intruding on the special bond she shared with her sister. Sarah shook off the unsettling memory as she spotted the familiar clearing up ahead through the trees. Hurrying the last few yards, she emerged into the grassy meadow, ringed by towering oaks and maples. In the center stood a small, well-tended mound with a simple granite marker at its head. Settling down cross-legged in front of the grave, Sarah gently set her bag aside and ran a loving hand over the sun-warmed stone. Engraved lily flower twined around the inscription. Lily Jane Reynolds, beloved daughter and sister, April 11th, 2008 to June 23rd, 2018. "Hi, Lily," Sarah said softly. "I'm back, and I brought some really good books this time. I think you're especially going to like this one about a dog." Opening up the first book in the stack, Albert Payson Terhune's His Dog, Sarah began to read aloud, her gentle voice carrying through the peaceful glade. As she lost herself in the tale of a faithful canine companion, she could almost see Lily sitting across from her, blue eyes sparkling above her impish grin as she hung on every word. They had spent countless happy hours like this when Lily was alive, sprawled on their bellies in the tall grass behind the house. Sarah reading adventure and animal stories while Lily listened raptly. Books had been their refuge, a magical escape from the hardscrabble world around them, their father's drunken rages, their mother's weary sadness. When the leukemia finally claimed 10-year-old Lily after a brutal 3-year battle, Sarah had been destroyed. Her bright, beautiful little sister, her best friend, was gone. Sarah's will to go on had died with Lily, buried in the cold, hard ground of the town cemetery. Until one day, a month later, when she found herself drawn inexplicably to the library. Wandering in a fog of grief, Sarah drifted to the autobiography section and picked out a book at random. It was The Story of My Life by Helen Keller. Something about the title resonated in Sarah's shattered heart, and she brought it home, reading it cover to cover in one sitting. In the famous deafblind author's eloquent words, Sarah found a tiny flicker of light in the smothering darkness of her sorrow. Helen Keller's incredible story of perseverance against unimaginable odds, of finding joy and purpose despite her challenges, sparked a glimmer of hope in Sarah. She returned to the library the next day, appetite whetted for more inspiring tales of the human spirit triumphant. With each new book, each new life chronicled, Sarah felt the heavy weight on her soul lighten just a bit. And soon, an idea began to take root. She started coming to Lily's grave every week, toting a new collection of books to share with her sister. Autobiographies, fiction, short stories, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Sarah could still have this precious time with Lily, could still make her smile and marvel at the power of a good tale, just as they always had. It made Sarah feel close to her again, kept her memory vibrantly alive. As spring slipped into summer, the sisters' special story time in the clearing became the center of Sarah's existence. She lived for those magical hours when she could shut out the pain and emptiness and just bask in Lily's presence again, the way it used to be. Her schoolwork and chores fell by the wayside as she devoted herself to earning more coveted library trips by doing extra work around the house. Her parents, lost in their own private anguish, failed to notice Sarah's increasingly withdrawn and erratic behavior. Only Mrs. Hanson, with her probing questions and concerned glances, threatened to disrupt the fragile fantasy world Sarah had constructed for herself. which was why Sarah now glared at the librarian in consternation as she suddenly stepped out from behind an oak tree at the edge of the clearing. Mrs. Hanson's expression was soft with sympathy as she took a tentative step forward.
I'm sorry, Sarah.
I shouldn't have intruded, but I was worried about you and I just wanted to understand. Go away. Sarah cut her off furiously, leaping to her feet. Leave us alone. Mrs. Hanson paused, holding up a placating hand. Please, Sarah, I'm not here to judge or interfere. From what I just saw, I think I understand now. About you and Lily. She gestured to the marker behind Sarah. Lily isn't with us anymore, is she? At least not in body. Sarah stared at the woman warily, lower lip trembling. After a long moment, she turned away, shoulders slumping. No one understands. They all think I should just get over it, move on. But I can't. I won't. Lily needs me. Mrs. Hanson nodded slowly. You're right, they don't understand. I'm not sure anyone can who hasn't experienced that kind of loss. And I would never presume to tell you how to grieve. She hesitated, then continued carefully. But Sarah, Lily wouldn't want you to live only half a life, shut away from the world. What you two shared through books, that profound connection. Maybe it's time to share that with others as well. Sarah hunched her shoulders. I don't want to share it with anyone else. This is our place, our time. I know, and you can still have that. But your capacity for love and empathy, your passion for storytelling, those are rare, beautiful gifts. Lily helped nurture those, and I think she'd want you to nurture them in others too, to spread the joy and hope you found through books. She smiled gently. You know, I'm starting a junior book club at the library for kids your age. We could really use someone like you to help lead the discussions and make recommendations. Maybe even do some read-alouds. It might be a nice way to make friends and share your love of literature, while still honoring Lily's memory. Sarah wavered, a war raging behind her chocolate brown eyes. She looked over her shoulder at Lily's headstone, worn smooth by months of loving caresses. I don't know. Lily and I, books were our special thing. I don't know if I can, if I'm ready. Just think about it, Mrs. Hanson said kindly. Take all the time you need. I'll be here if you decide you want to try. Gently squeezing the girl's shoulder, the librarian turned and made her way out of the clearing, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. The next few days passed in an agony of indecision for Sarah. Her weekly visit to Lily's grave and their story time ritual loomed, but Mrs. Hanson's words echoed relentlessly in her head. Was she really doing the right thing, spending all her time lost in books and memories? Was it what Lily would have wanted for her? Yes, their bond through reading had been uniquely special. But maybe, a small voice whispered, that's exactly why it deserves to be shared. So that other kids can experience that same joy and solace you did. As she approached the clearing that Saturday, Sarah only felt more torn and conflicted. Kneeling before the headstone, she bowed her head, almost as if in prayer. Oh, Lily, she whispered brokenly. I don't know what to do. I miss you so much. Reading to you, escaping into stories together. It's the only time I feel close to you anymore. The only way I can keep you with me. A tear slid down her cheek. But Mrs. Hanson got me thinking. Would you want this for me? To hide from the world, live in the past. You were always the brave one, the one ready for any adventure. As much as you loved our reading time, you loved playing with friends and trying new things too. Sarah's shoulders shook with quiet sobs, her tears splashing on the dry summer grass.
I'm scared, Lil.
Scared to let you go, scared to move on, scared to open up to people again. Because losing you hurt so much. I don't ever want to feel that again. For a long time, she simply cried, curled up against the sun-warmed granite. An errant breeze kicked up, ruffling the pages of the open book that lay forgotten by Sarah's knee. Wiping her eyes, she glanced down, gaze falling on the passage in his dog where the faithful wolfhound lad risks his own life to save others, even in the face of danger and tragedy. Something inside Sarah shifted, pieces falling into place like tumblers in a lock. Lad was so loyal and fearless, even when he lost his best friend, she murmured wonderingly. He used his gifts to help others no matter what. He kept living his purpose. Sarah straightened up, squaring her thin shoulders. Lily had been her lad, her brave and true companion, and Sarah knew suddenly, with blinding clarity, what Lily would want her to do: live with an open and courageous heart, and use her passions to light the way for others, just as Lily had always done for her. Picking up the book with trembling fingers, Sarah placed it reverently on the grave, then bent to press a soft kiss to the marker. "I'll make you proud, Lil. I'll carry your spirit with me and we'll go on adventures together, just in a different way. I'll keep your memory alive by sharing our love of stories, but I'll make new memories too. I promise." Standing, Sarah shouldered her bag and took a deep breath. With one last long look at the granite lily, she turned and walked out of the clearing, tall and purposeful. At precisely 2 p.m. the next Saturday, Mrs. Hanson looked up with a wide smile as Sarah Jane Reynolds walked hesitantly into the Millersville Public Library. In her hands, the girl clutched several well-worn editions of her favorite animal adventure books. "You came," Mrs. Hanson said warmly. "I'm so glad, Sarah." Sarah managed a tentative smile back. "I wasn't sure I would, but I think Lily would want me to try." The librarian nodded, eyes suspiciously misty. "I think you're right, and I have a feeling she's very proud of you right now." She gestured to a circle of chairs tucked between the stacks where a handful of kids around Sarah's age sat waiting expectantly. "Ready to meet your book club?" Clutching her books to her chest, Sarah took a shaky breath and let it out slowly. Her gaze traveled around the small group, taking in the friendly, curious faces gazing back at her. The knot in her stomach loosened a bit. They weren't so scary, just kids like her hoping to make a friend and get lost in a good book. Sarah thought of Lily, forever 10 but with an old soul's wisdom in her cornflower blue eyes. She'd always seen the best in people, had a gift for making friends and putting others at ease. It was time for Sarah to try to do the same. Lifting her chin, Sarah nodded at Mrs. Hanson. "I'm ready." She walked to the center of the circle and smiled shyly at the other kids, holding up her books.
I'm Sarah.
"I thought we could start by talking about some of my favorite stories. This one is about the world's bravest dog." As she began passing the books around and describing each one, Sarah's nervousness melted away, replaced by a quiet confidence and enthusiasm. She could practically feel Lily's hand on her shoulder, could see her crooked grin flashing encouragement. The next few hours passed in a warm, spirited discussion of loyal pets, thrilling wilderness ordeals, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. The other kids quickly warmed to Sarah, drawing her out with questions and excited responses to her suggestions. By the end, everyone was eagerly picking out books to take home and exclaiming over what theme to explore next time. As the last club member filed out, Sarah hung back, fingers trailing thoughtfully over the cover of his dog. She turned to Mrs. Hanson with a hesitant smile. "I'm really glad I came today. Felt good to share those stories with other people. To see them get excited about books the way Lily and I always did. I felt close to her again, but in a different way." Mrs. Hanson returned the smile, eyes warm. "She was certainly here in spirit, guiding you. I could feel it. You have a real gift, Sarah. A way of connecting to people through stories, of instilling that love of reading." She cocked her head, considering the girl. "Have you ever thought about being a librarian yourself someday? I could definitely see you inspiring young readers, carrying on what you and Lily had." Sarah blinked in surprise, then a slow, wondering smile spread across her face. "I never thought about it before, but I think I'd like that, to help kids find the same joy and comfort in books that I did, that Lily and I did together." Her smile turned bittersweet. "Lily wanted to be a writer, you know. She was always making up stories, said she was going to write books that made people feel things, that stayed with them." Sarah swallowed hard. "I think I'd like to help keep that dream alive for her in my own way, by connecting people with stories that inspire them." Mrs. Hanson reached out to squeeze Sarah's shoulder. "I think that's a beautiful way to honor her memory, and an incredible path for you. I'll be here to support you every step of the way." Eyes shining, Sarah impulsively threw her arms around the older woman. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Summer turned to fall, and as the humid Virginia days cooled and the leaves burst into brilliant shades of red and gold, Sarah Jane Reynolds began to bloom too. With each passing week, she grew more confident and animated as a junior librarian and book club leader. Her passion for matchmaking kids with the perfect story was evident and infectious. She had a particular knack for drawing out the shy, awkward kids, the misfits and loners, and helping them find belonging and purpose in the pages of a book. Just as she herself had found through Lily, the void left by her sister's loss would never fully heal, but it was slowly filling with new meaning, new hope and direction. Sarah still visited Lily's grave once a week to read aloud and share the highlights of her latest literary adventures. But the raw, wrenching grief was gradually transmuting into something bittersweet and almost beautiful. The quiet knowledge that every child she inspired was part of keeping Lily's fierce, bright spirit alive. As her 16th birthday approached, Sarah decided she wanted to do something special to commemorate her sister. She pored over ideas with Mrs. Hanson, who had become a beloved mentor, and together they landed on the perfect plan: a reading garden dedicated to Lily, built adjacent to the library. The whole community came together to bring the vision to life, donating labor, materials, funds, and books. Over several weekends, a cracked concrete strip along the side of the library was transformed into a lush, secluded little courtyard with cozy bench seating, overflowing flower beds and towering oak trees transplanted from the woods behind town. The centerpiece was a stone collection box for book donations with an engraved portrait of Lily. Beneath her name, an inscription read, "Every story opens a door to a new world. May Lily's love of reading live on through all who discover magic in these pages." On dedication day, Sarah stood before the large crowd gathered in the garden, knees shaking but head held high. She shared a few memories of Lily, her unquenchable curiosity, her stubborn bravery in the face of illness, the way she could make a story come alive. By the time she thanked everyone for bringing the memorial to fruition, there wasn't a dry eye to be found. As the townsfolk mingled and exclaimed over the new space, Sarah wandered over to the stone visage of her sister. Tracing the etched lines of the familiar features, a wistful smile turned up the corners of her mouth. "Well, Lil, we did it," she whispered. "This is all for you, a place for your adventurous spirit to live on, for other kids to find the magic we did in books." A light autumn breeze kicked up, tossing amber leaves in a swirl around Sarah's feet. As she watched them dance, a flicker of movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. Turning her head, she spotted a small, shadowy alcove tucked behind a rustling oak tree at the back of the garden. Curious, Sarah approached it slowly. There, nearly hidden in the dappled shade, stood a simple wooden bench. But it was what rested upon its weathered slats that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. A book, worn and well-loved, lay as if waiting for her. And on its cover, an achingly familiar title, The Secret Garden. With trembling fingers, Sarah picked up the volume and turned to the front end paper. There, in faded purple crayon, was a wobbly inscription: "To my big sis Sarah, for teaching me how to dream. Slow forever, your lily flower." A soft gasp escaped Sarah's lips as hot tears pricked the corners of her eyes. The Secret Garden had been Lily's favorite, the first big kid book she had read with Sarah during those long days at the hospital. They had both fallen in love with the story of sickly, lonely Mary Lennox and her discovery of an abandoned garden that she brings back to life, much like the garden flourishes and heals Mary in turn. It was a message Sarah hadn't been ready to receive in the early days of her grief. But now, standing in this sanctuary of love and living memory, she understood. Lily had already given her the key to healing way back then. She had been preparing Sarah for this moment all along, giving her the strength and wisdom to carry on. Clutching the book to her heart, Sarah looked around at the beautiful space she had helped create, at the people gathered here, celebrating Lily's life. Just like Mary, Sarah had found a way to channel her pain into cultivating something vital and alive, her own secret garden. And in doing so, in learning to open her heart again and pour Lily's love into others, she had brought a piece of her sister back to life too. had become the person Lily always knew she could be, her very best self. Blinking back tears, Sarah reverently replaced the secret garden on the bench, to be found and cherished by another soul in need of its special magic. Then, squaring her shoulders, she walked out of the alcove to rejoin the gathering, the hints of a peaceful smile playing about her lips. As she stepped back into the golden light of the garden, a sudden warmth brushed her cheek, an invisible touch light as a butterfly's wing. And for just a moment, Sarah could have sworn she smelled the honeysuckle sweetness of her little sister's hair, could feel the solid weight of a small hand slipping into her own. "I did it, Lil," she whispered. "We did it. Thank you for helping me find my way home." And as Sarah Jane Reynolds looked out over the beautiful haven of stories and remembrance she had brought to life with Lily's guiding hand, she knew that whatever path she took from here, her sister would be walking right beside her, always.